This is a composition checklist, and this presentation is for students that have gone through the composition program who are now required to make an Erasmus aura for one of their photos. Now, as you went through that particular program, you've learned a number of different compositional elements that show up in photos, and we're just going to review those really quickly. But these should be something that you're fairly familiar with, and so you shouldn't have too much bother figuring out what elements are in your photos, whether it's just one or many. So let's look at them right now. The first thing is balance. We either have symmetrical or asymmetrical balance. And the choice will be up to you how you balance your subjects. You can balance things with objects, with color, with light. And as we experimented in class, you can quickly see that balance can be very complex depending on your subject matter. If we look at the photo here, the heavy weight of the truck and the lightness of the sky balance each other out. Another thing we looked at was point of view, also known as perspective, and it can be many things. Often it's the first person point of view, and it's in landscape or portrait, but it can be anything that we want. We can use an oblique angle, we can use up high, down low, worm's eye view, bird's eye view, whatever you like. And so that choice will be up to you. Simplicity is, in a nutshell, cutting out all that extra stuff that you don't need. And so when you look at a photo, people should be able to determine what the subject is. The photo that we're looking at here, this is my son Duncan. As you can see, I used a shallow depth of field to cut out all that extra stuff behind him, and he is simply really the only subject that we're looking at here in this photo. Nothing else in the background is distracting. Speaking of background, a clear subject and background is important. So when your audience looks at your photo, they should be able to determine what it is. So if they look at this photo that I took out by Pincher Creek, we've got a field, a house, the mountains, the clouds. All those things are very clear, but if you were to look at this, you're going to look right at that house. So it's a clear subject, clear background. There's nothing distracting or obstructing what it is that we should be looking at here. The rule of thirds, basically this rule is taking your photo and creating a tic-tac-toe grid over your image. And the thing about this is that people say that certain elements in your photo should line up on the lines or on the intersecting points. Other people say it should fill in 2/3 of the grid or 1/3. What this really is a technical guideline. It's for people who get stuck. And certainly rules, like any rules, are meant to be broken, so don't be afraid to break this rule. If you've got a good composition, it doesn't necessarily have to adhere to the rule of thirds. Same with the golden triangle rule. It's a simple rule. Basically, it works with some lines. This is when we start applying math to art, and I tend to think that that doesn't necessarily work very well. But the way it works is basically framing your shot and making sure that the subject falls into one of the three triangles that you create. And so you draw in an oblique line from one corner to the other and a perpendicular line at a 90-degree angle to one of the corners, and that's how you create your golden triangle. I tend to stay away from this rule, but if it's something that works for you, then feel free to use it. Depth of field, obviously we have shallow, medium, and great depths of field. How you choose it to use it's up to you, but I tend to think that a shallow depth of field is really great at focusing in on a particular subject and cutting out all that extra stuff in the background. But you'll find whatever works for your different subjects. Texture. Texture is something that you can feel in your mind. If you look at something that shows texture, you should be able to think about, wow, is it soft? Is it hard? Is it rough? Is it organic? Is it man-made? So your audience should be able to visualize some sort of feel when they look at the textures in your photograph. Lines come in all sorts of variations, horizontal, vertical, oblique, curved. And so They can be literally interpreted, where you're taking a photo of a line. It can be a line of things like we're seeing here. These chocolates I took a photo of, they're all lined up, but they also have lines on top of them. So the choice is up to you. Repetition, when we look at repetition, we're looking at repeated elements here. You can see that with the barrels that I took at the Bladnoch Distillery in southwest Scotland. So nice, simple repetition, and you'll find repetition all over the place. Light is a tricky thing. Light, as you know, is key to photography. If you don't have light, you don't have photos. And so you can choose how light affects the mood and the color of your photos, and certainly you can take advantage of it at different times of day, in particular the golden hour, which we're looking at here, where we've got nice warm hues from the sunset. Shadow, again, shadow is has everything to do with light. Without light, you don't have shadows, but it can, play around with the composition of your photo too. In this instance, we're looking at a truck that I shot, and the shadows in here create some nice depth that you just wouldn't get otherwise. And so you can choose it to be part of your composition or the entire composition itself. There's no right or wrong. Framing is simply using your surroundings to frame a subject, and here we have a photo of my family and I in Scotland, and we're framed by this window frame, so makes sense. Space, obviously, how much space you have in your photos is up to you, and this is particularly important when you're using negative space like we're seeing here. So the sky is this huge chunk of this photo, and we can easily manipulate this by raising or lowering the horizon to choose how much of that space we want to see, but you can use it to create a sense of size or place simply by creating more space, as you can see here. Color, obviously everything is in color that we see, and the way I think of color in a compositional point of view is that you can use it as the focal point for your photo. So when someone looks at your photo, take away whatever the content is as far as, or the subject is, but the content, if it's color, then they should say that photo is yellow, or it's brown, or it's red, and then you can say, okay, that is a brown cow or a red rose. Contrast is a variation between light and dark, and of course, if it's a color that we're talking about, it's called value. And the nice thing about working with black and white is you can really have a large variety of contrast in your photos and tonal ranges, and you can tweak it to make your images look very interesting. You can take a fairly mundane color photo actually, and just by bumping up that contrast, you can make things really pop. And it's very interesting, and it definitely plays with light and shadow, and so it's something that I think is a lot of fun to work with. Cropping reveals or hides certain elements that are in your photo. Sometimes it's great for taking out mistakes, but it can take your photo and turn it into an entirely new composition. And photographers definitely do this quite often, especially ones that are in the business of selling their prints. They'll take images and they'll crop them and they'll sell them as different series of particular prints, and it's a good way of experimenting with composition, but also with making some money. And then of course juxtaposition is two or more elements in a photograph that have a similarity or a dissimilarity between them. So it could be warm and cool, it could be big and small, man-made and nature, young and old. Here we've got a big hand and a small hand. And so yeah, that's it. Of course, this is all review for you, and if you have any questions at this point, you should really talk to your instructor before making your aura, just to confirm whether you really do have this down. But I think the amount of time we've spent on composition, this should be old hat. So good luck with your auras, and I look forward to seeing them.